Hello and welcome to Confidently Wrong, a show by regular dudes talking with confidence about content we have no right to speak about with any kind of authority, but do it anyway. I'm Wesley Nakamura, and as always, I'm joined by award-winning director Brian Redondo and Savon Jones, aka Captain Fonny. This is episode 114, and we geek out after having just seen Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Spoilers will definitely be following. I'm confident that it's going to be the best show you've ever listened to, and well, hey, if it's not, you can always ask us for a refund.
Incredible!
Hello, gentlemen. It's good to see you guys. I got my scruffy summer beard on right now.
I like the high-pitched "see you guys." It makes me believe you.
Playoff West.
Can you hear this? My scruffiness. I don't know if you can hear that.
Do you do that, Wes? Do you have like a playoff beard for like the end of the year with students? Like once the final countdown, it's like, hey,
a little bit
until finals is over or whatever.
You know, we got down to the AP test, and I just didn't have any time, and then it kept going. Wait, but school is done. We're done.
Oh, yeah, had y'all last day of school?
Congratulations.
Yeah, I got to go to graduation later today, and that is it. That is the end of my responsibilities for the year.
How you rating this year out of?
It was pretty good.
I'll let you do out of 10. I'm not gonna put you in the out of 5 box. Out of 10 and rate the year.
Out of 10, I'd say this was a good 8.5. Some great students. I only had 3 students fail for the year. A couple more kids failed the quarter, but they did enough in the previous quarters to pass for the year. So that's not bad. Out of 100-ish students, 3
I was
failing.
going to say 4.
I'll take it. I will take it. And it was good. I changed up my classroom this year a little bit to be a little bit different. So hopefully next year we'll build on that. And it'll be good. But let's talk about what we're here to talk about, which is the hotly anticipated Spider-Man
Anticipated.
Yeah. That's where you give people their utensils and flatware and all that good stuff. So this is Across the Spider-Verse, Miles Morales movie. Animated studio, Sony Studios Pictures, something like that. Sony Picture Studios. Who knows? It doesn't matter. A lot to unpack in this movie, guys. So let's just jump right into expectations you had before going into the movie, and then how you felt walking out of the movie. You don't need to do a big analysis because we're going to talk about that finale later. Brian.
Well, I think it's probably well documented, and I will reiterate here again that the previous film, Into the Spider-Verse, hands down, best comic book movie of all time. It is cinema. It is cinema. You know, even James Gunn, I watched this interview with James Gunn where they asked him to list his top 5 comic book movies. Number 1 was Into the Spider-Verse, and he says in it, there's no bad beat in it. There, like everything is right. It just locks into place everything. And I am in complete agreement with that.
Savon, do you agree?
Of Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh, wait, you never saw it.
Savon, man. I don't even know how you are qualified to be on this podcast right now. The prereqs have not been completed.
How have you not seen
this yet?
How have you not seen this
I just found out it's on Hulu, so I'm not going to watch it. I'm going to watch it today.
Oh, yes. Okay, now watch it. You have to watch with ads, though. I'm sorry.
Hey, y'all getting real loose at the lips and getting real spicy with some of y'all tone, talking about Tyler and Kendall was doing that last night. It was getting real spicy. I told them I spoiled a movie for y'all. And they, had to get some act right in their system. I will spoil things that y'all care about too. I put up this nice act. We could get real toxic in this joint.
We already know you don't want to watch Oppenheimer, so I don't think you can spoil much for me.
I will watch it the night it comes out. Just so I can spoil what happens.
How dare you?
All right. So Brian, you were anticipating it coming in. So
I was very excited. I
was too.
I was very excited. And this is one of those few movies where I was trying really hard not to watch the trailer. Just because I knew.
You didn't watch the trailer.
I was trying hard not to. I was kind of force-fed the trailer. I think maybe watching NBA playoffs or whatever.
It's been, yeah.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean it's out there. You sort of know what it's about. You kind of you come in with expectations. But I really enjoyed myself. I was in a theater of children. It was packed to the brim with middle schoolers whose minds were blown by this movie.
Oh my
It
God.
felt like I was a chaperone.
Core memory for them. They were probably, dude, so cool.
There were six like 12-year-old girls sharing 3 seats in front of me. And they
Oh my
kept
goodness.
going up and down. They kept like getting up to go to the bathroom and get snacks and look at their
Oh
phone.
no, that breaks Savon's rule of movie going.
Yeah, I was just
Terrible.
like, oh, that's so sweet.
Get out of here. Get out of my theater. But I mean, it was just like a great experience for me. Like, despite all of that, that's how much I enjoyed the movie. And and it, I could have sat there for much longer and consumed more Spider-Verse, which we'll talk about later.
And walking out of the movie, you felt the same? You're like, yes.
Oh yeah, I immediately, me and Anna were just buzzing, and we're like, I think we need to see that again, like right now.
Yo, facts. So big facts.
All right. I was super excited going in. I was anticipating. I really enjoyed the first movie. My appetite was whetted. I don't know if that's how you say that. Whetted? Whetted?
Wetted.
It's a
wetted,
it's
like
a word
wet,
I've
like
only
wetted, like a
seen.
whetstone.
Okay, yeah.
Wetted
Okay, great.
Nakamura.
You've used whetstone before.
The
That
learning
sounds
platform?
dirty, man.
Yeah, but point is, that's the word. Wet. Yes.
All right. I left bewildered. We'll talk about that later. Savon, how did you feel?
Yeah, so going in, I mean, even not having seen the first movie, this movie has gotten universal praise from pretty much every person, and
So has the first one, Savon.
Yeah, I'm talking about the first one. I'm saying the first one got like universal praise, so this wasn't will it live up to the hype? It's like, okay, I know that the hype is real, but what I always was thinking was, oh man, it is really hard to do a sequel that lives up to a movie that's so critically acclaimed like that. Like, it happens rarely. It happens rarely. So my thought going in, the cynical side of me was, is this going to be a really, really, really good movie that just had impossible expectations to live up to, which happens? Or will it be a Shrek 2 that takes everything good about the first one and just builds on it even better? And from what I've seen...
Wait. Are you saying Shrek 2 is better than Shrek 1?
Absolutely. And that's not a slight to Shrek 1. Shrek 1 is one of the greatest animated movies ever. The reason Shrek 2 is so amazing is because I think it took everything funny about Shrek
I don't think I ever saw it.
Stepped it up and was hilarious. Now afterwards, that's up for debate, but like, I think Shrek 2 is one of the best sequels ever, but that's a different conversation.
All right.
But yeah, I went into this movie knowing the production value and pedigree is all really, really high. And oh my goodness, I was just blown away. There was just no, I think a comment I saw on the internet about this movie was that every frame of this movie could be a painting on your wall in your house.
Absolutely.
And I couldn't agree with that statement more.
Except your house, because you have zero.
Except for me.
On your walls.
Except for me. I will do it if someone has a free still, I will put it up there. But I, in good conscience, cannot spend my finite money on something I don't get what I perceive as value out of.
All right, artist friends. Savon says art isn't worth anything.
No, art's awesome. We need art.
Gift him a cell from this animation, and he will put it on his wall.
Anyways, I love the movie, and walking out,
I'm glad you liked it.
I walked out of the movie a little bit like,
yeah,
but for good, ultimately in a good way that we'll talk about in a second about why ultimately I think it was a good way, the way I felt about the ending. But I was thoroughly entertained from top to bottom, and that's all I asked for in a movie when it's all said and done. $10 well spent.
Damn, good deal.
Yeah. I mean, I told you, I only go see movies matinee. Like, I took off yesterday and went and saw it at like 1 o'clock.
Yeah, we still don't have... Well, I think in Austin, the cheapest you can get is like 11 usually. All right. So the rest of this podcast, heavy spoilers.
Oh, the spoilerverse.
Heavy spoilers coming. So if you haven't seen it yet, I don't know what maybe you're just not going to see it and you just want to hear us talk about it. But
no, they should go see it. Honestly, you're going to know everyone should see this.
Now you're going to know what's happening.
I mean, your predictions might be right that this could be the movie of the summer and everybody's going to watch it.
700
felt that
million.
way.
That was the prediction I made, was we're going to hit 700 million. I saw ahead of time though that they're on pace to hit 80 million this weekend, which I don't know that that's actually going to be enough to get them to 700, which was the target I thought they could hit. But we'll see. Maybe it's going to outperform the 80 million prediction, cuz my movie theater was pretty full. And when I was trying to buy tickets, like most of the showings were pretty full. So we'll see what happens. All right. This movie, visually just like stunning, like Savon said, everything is like a painting, and a ton of different visual styles going on. There was just a lot to take in. I think that's partly why, Brian, you might have walked out of the theater being like, I think we need to see it again, because there was just so much going on the screen, and like every part of the screen was being used. It was fantastic. And Savon, you were saying you think that's probably why it took so long to get a sequel, was they had to just spend so much time animating and creating, and then probably the pandemic slowed them down as well. What is one artistic choice that really stood out to you, or that you really kind of dug into? Let's start with Savon on this one.
Yeah, I mean, so in general, I have, the generic answer is that every Spider world, every Spider character felt so beautiful and unique and had their own art style, right? And that's like the obvious basic answer, which is the right answer. So I'm gonna zero into
pat myself
was it
on the back.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying, because that's like, I want to all of it's amazing, but I think my favorite was probably what was it when they
It was
were
definitely
in
Hobie, huh?
no, actually not Hobie. Even though Hobie was
Okay.
amazing, it was the Indian Spider-Man in was it
Oh, that was cool.
Moonbatten?
Moonbatten.
Woo.
Moonbatten, hilarious,
Mumbai
by the
and
way.
Manhattan.
Yes, hilarious.
Portmanteaued together.
Yes,
Moonbatten.
but no, I love that entire city, the art style, the entire bit with him just being the flawless chill. Everything goes well. His entire introduction sequence and just the art with that was beautiful. The music along with it, the visuals of this movie obviously are what is going to stand out immediately, because you can see that no matter where you are. But man, when you're in the theater, the actual soundtrack and just the way the soundtrack subtly and not so subtly changes based on the cultures and locations, it really just made me have it added an extra layer of fun, and really just was, hey man, these people put so much work into every detail of this film. But I felt like I was on a magic adventure when they were in his city, doing all the stuff, fighting, slinging. He had his cool little spider.
Yo-yo.
Yeah,
It's
like a little yo-yo
yo-yo.
deal. And all the sequences with the collapsing buildings. I loved it. Like, that scene alone is like, oh, I gotta watch this again. That was probably my favorite, where I just actually felt like a little kid in the theater, like, oh man, this is the dopest shit I've seen in ages.
Yeah, transcendent.
Brian.
I co-sign that 100%. And props to them for also doing like chai jokes, chai tea, like
yes.
Tea.
I love that,
bread.
or getting on the spot about like, this better not be like an eat, pray, love thing that you're doing here, because we ain't about that. Loved all those things. I think for me was one of the most eye-popping or pleasantly surprising visual treatments we got in the intro of the movie, where we're spending time with Gwen Stacy, which is also a nice surprise. I didn't think we were gonna start with her story, and I could have had a lot more of that as well. But in that intro, we get a vulture, an out of universe vulture, who has a Da Vinci style. Yeah,
The
like
vulture.
a hand drawn, Leonardo da Vinci doing his engineering schematics type drawing, animated. And that was, to me, just phenomenal, like completely out of the box, unexpected, and making it like, it wasn't even just the hand drawing, but it was also about the paper that was used, like the aged browning parchment that ruffles along and has strips that rip away. And vulture's like throwing little bombs, and each one is on its own little brown piece of scrap paper, and it's flying through the air. That, I think that treatment was just like, really lets you know this Spider-Verse movie is unlike any other multiverse movie you've seen, because they can go there. They can go to these places that live action struggles with. And then, of course, speaking of live action, there are a couple. There's actually several live action cameos that are thrown into this, and I love that they threw that into the mix. That not only is this an animated universe, but the multiverse is vast. So it's animated, it's Legos, it's live action, and we get some crazy cameos in here. Those ones I don't think I want to spoil exactly, but there's a little bit of fan service there, but done in a very fun and right way that I think is like the cameo that we deserved. Yeah, it didn't take away from the movie; it just added to it.
Sav, you want to add?
Yeah. Oh man, Brian was just kind of like he was talking so much fire. Oh yeah, about the Da Vinci Vulture. Another thing that's so hard to do is to make characters in completely different art styles and mediums, especially as drastic as they went with this movie, and make them still feel threatening. At first, I thought the Da Vinci Vulture felt like a joke almost. Oh, he's paper, he's harmless, he can't do nothing. And then they made it very clear, no, don't let the brown paper and goofy funny art style fool you. Homeboy
that razor
is
still
threat.
Sharp.
He is a threat. He is shooting fire. He's making the spider people work. That is, I think in general, that's really hard to do, but I guess I'm just co-signing why I also love that sequence too. Because at first I'm like, okay, they're going to handle him. And I'm like, oh, actually, homeboy's a threat. He looks silly and they're cracking paper jokes themselves, but he's also giving them that work, which I appreciated quite a bit.
I thought it was funny that the Renaissance art style, well, the style of villain that he was from the period like of the Renaissance, right? And where it's a very realistic form of like painting and drawing, and then he's in the Guggenheim, which has all these like more conceptual pieces and like postmodern pieces or modern pieces, like the what are the inflatable
balloon
dog?
balloon dog, yeah,
balloon dog.
And he's like,
filled
what
with
is
tiny
this?
balloon dogs.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, Jeff Koons didn't even think of that.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that would have been really cool. And then it's like it spills out, right? So and they're all falling out. Like that's its own art installation right there.
Yeah, a lot of jokes within jokes with the art. A lot of like just visual jokes with the art style that like there was almost no lines dedicated to that entire bit. But to your point, if you have an eye for detail in art, you'll be like, oh, look at this clear them juxtaposing this.
Yeah.
And it takes, the kids don't need that at all. But for all the deep cut nerds or even art, and art
of course,
fans.
Yeah, of course he wouldn't appreciate that kind of art, right? Like that is very different than the aesthetic and the norms that were sort of established, 500 years ago.
Yeah.
To me, the part that stood out, first of all, was the watercolors in Gwen's universe, especially how they could kind of like flow and change. And like there was a moment where she kind of has beef with her dad, and then she goes up and hugs him, and like there's kind of like a pink radiant glow that kind of appears behind them. And so the colors are not a reliable thing in terms of they're not consistent in her universe. There's kind of blues and pinks and purples, and they kind of just like transform into each other. But it was just like gorgeous to watch at. And then coupled with like that story, I think Brian is right. Like I almost wanted more time with Gwen. Like I love that they started with that. It was like really interesting. That dynamic between Gwen and the dad. I want to talk about this later, but
did it hit you? It hit you? Wes?
Yeah, that was probably the most in like chemistry filled scenes. Like it was just like there was the most emotional weight between those
very tense
moments. And I mean, I think even more so than with Miles and his parents for some reason. So I loved it.
I want to talk about I definitely want to talk more about that later because I have very strong feelings about that dynamic in a good way.
The other thing I want to point out, like Spot was cool, and like Spot was drawn with like the sketch line still in him sometimes. And then this is not like a visual like artwork style, but more in terms of like how they would frame things. So this is more like, I don't know, on the cinematography side, but they spent a lot of time with Miles and with Gwen upside down in the world. And I think for me that hit a lot because I was like, oh, we as the audience are disoriented sometimes when it's like that. And I think because this is a teenager movie, right? Like that's a nice little symbolism of like how these teenagers are feeling in this world and how teenagers navigate the world. Cause I'm around teenagers all the time.
Like going deep.
Their world is like always just not making sense to them. And they're just always trying to like, be like, well, but this is how it should be. And then other people are like, that's not what like
being a teenager was awful.
Yeah. They have a hard time conceiving what other people are thinking. And they're like, but you should understand, like when I say this and when I do this, like you should know. And I'm like, they're not mind readers. Like your boyfriend or girlfriend, they don't know any of that. All you things you just said to me about like what you meant by like not talking to them for 2 minutes, like they didn't understand any of that. Like all that intention you had, like went way over their head, especially if it's a boy. Like that boy had no idea what you were trying to communicate with that little
Wes.
sideways glance.
Yeah, Wes counseling, Wes giving married family man Wes.
I know.
Married family man Wes giving some healthy relationship advice to these youngins. Teaching them how to communicate. Giving
Sit
back.
right side up, damn it.
Let me tell you something, youngin. I've been in this game for a hot little minute now. As a married man and a father, that's not what's going to work.
I was like, and as a teenager, I would have understood none of that. Let me tell you, I was a teenage boy. None of that would have made sense to me. So good luck with that. If that's your strategy, you're gonna have a lot of problems. So good maybe change the strategy.
Also, don't draw your crush so many times in your notebook and let her see it.
Well, she just took it. He did not want her to see it. He took his notebook and started going through it.
Instant regret, right? Like,
she was just like,
can't have that lying around.
But in fairness, in her cold open, even though she can't draw, she is clearly thinking about him just as much. So,
she was like, "Ooh, I shouldn't have seen this." Yeah.
I think she liked it because she was like, "Hey,
she definitely liked it.
Of course, she did.
It was like one of those. This is cringe, but like
this
is for the. This works when y'all both like each other. This is one of those. It works. So, good job, Miles.
All right. So Miles Morales still the star of the show, although Gwen gets a bigger platform here. And you said
well-used
Savon. Yeah, Savon, you said he was introduced in 2011 in the comics?
Yeah, so
and someone said it was kind of a sort of a play between like Donald Glover playing Spider-Man in Community.
So it's a lot of stuff, but I think the biggest thing is that Marvel used to have this comic run called the Ultimate Universe, and it was basically the Marvel world, but way edgier. That's actually
younger
what we got.
too, right?
Yeah, it was just like a reimagining, but just in a much hard, like in that world, Mr. Fantastic's a villain. There's a lot of stuff. Characters die more permanently. And that's why you get Miles Morales, because in the storyline, Spider-Man dies in that universe, and then that's what opens up Miles Morales becoming the new Spider-Man, right?
So Marvel went woke in 2011. Did they go broke, though? That's the question.
Damn it, Wes. don't validate those people. But
this is Fox News now.
No, but they introduced him in like an alternate universe for a comic line, and that's the same world where we get like the Nick Fury based more on Samuel L. Jackson. Like that was the same universe we got that. A lot of it ended up working out where even though the universe in that comic line failed and they ended up still writing Miles into the main Marvel universe in 2015, or the main comic universe in 2015 when they had the storyline.
Buckle up, kids! We're on a history lesson.
Yeah, that's how popular he was. They wanted to retain him.
Seriously, they put him in like a not throwaway, but like an alternate, not their mainstream world, and he ended up popping off and kind of being popular enough to where they said, "Hey, let's keep him, put him in the mainstream world," and now. You have him he has his own pretty like well-defined history already in a short time. And they've kind of really leaned into he's even with Peter Parker. Okay, that's his mentor. He's going to mentee him and teach him the ways and still keep it fresh. But Miles definitely has come a long way in the last, 10 to 15, almost 15 years now. So yeah, a little history, but yes, there was a lot of talk of Donald Glover playing him originally when they were trying to maybe get a Miles Morales live action project off the ground. His name always floated around a lot, but clearly by the time it got off the ground, he aged out of it. So we got that in other forms.
But he loves it, which is partially why he is always showing up in Spider-Man related vehicles. And, and like even in Community, he wears like a Spider-Man onesie at some point, right? He just like is fanning the flames.
He was definitely good promotion for an already like interesting character who clearly kind of had some natural footing and people just rocked with it. But Donald Glover definitely helped, and shout out to him. Shout out to everybody with the Miles putting together Miles.
Yeah, well, Donald Glover in the Spider-Man movie in Homecoming. He's kind of a low level, criminal type. He's trying to buy some weapons or something like that.
He's Uncle Aaron.
Yeah. So he says, right, like my nephew, blah, blah. And so maybe he was talking about Miles at that point.
No, 100%. His character's name is like, I think Aaron Davis.
Okay.
So that's not like a maybe. That's like a definite.
Yeah. And then he shows up in this movie in his Prowler uniform. or costume in the little prison thing.
Yeah.
So
Which, by the
he got
way,
caught
meant
in
that.
this one.
Which, by the way, that meant that a lot of bigwigs had to sign off on that. Like Disney
Yeah.
had to sign off, Sony, like
Marvel, yeah.
yeah, a lot of people who would have been like, no, absolutely not. We're like, okay, yeah.
It's
So
too much of a joke, you know.
yeah,
I mean, it
or
was
just like,
great. Like
they're
all the
protective about their
13-year-olds
characters.
in my theater were like, "Oh my god,
I
Childish
was in the theater.
Gambino!"
I saw it. I was like, oh, I was in that thing turning into a kid. So, but I do want to
that's
talk
great.
about Miles's character briefly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when we got this new Spider-Man, obviously the biggest thing was, oh, he's the Black Spider-Man. That was, that's cool and dandy, but that's can feel shallow, right? And so the big question a lot of folks have is, all right, well, what is Miles's story? How is he different than Peter Parker, all of this? And I gotta say, and this is not just within this movie, because in other medium too, because I played those Spider-Man games, I've watched some of the other Spider-Man shows, they have done a great job of making him still have the key elements of a Spider-Man, of being a smart, intelligent, wisecracking character, which I think is at his core, no matter who the spider, what spider person it is. But man, just his culture, his background, just him, like Wes, you talked about it before in one of your responses of they did such a great blend of just respecting his African and Puerto Rican heritage. He loves hip hop, but he still loves this music that has, but he still has these Spanish phrases with his mom. He's into the graffiti and hip hop, and not even just hip hop, but just the music with his uncle. But then he still has like his, tios and tias and all that. They make him feel very real in a way that even if it's not your immediate culture that you can relate to, it still is organic and like you can still identify with it in other ways, which I think was why Spider-Man was always a good hero in the first place. Like people like Spider-Man not because he's just like an American white kid, because people just relate to being a teenager and his teen struggles, and he's a teen first, everything else after, which they just pull off fantastically well. And then the crux of the movie itself that I like is that, unlike almost all the other Spider people, Miles so far isn't defined by trauma, I think, in the way that a lot of the others were. He didn't lose both his parents and then lose his Uncle Ben and then just have, like, depending on the version, elderly Aunt May. And then depending on the movies, that Aunt May even dies, depending on, like a lot of the Spider-Man stories,
Later,
Peter does
Marissa
not.
Tomei.
Yeah, like, dude, a lot of the Spider-Man stories, it is not, Peter really does lose a lot of people around him he cares about. And I don't know what's going to happen in the next, later in the series, but Miles has like a genuinely good support system. Like he has two parents who love him, an active, involved dad who's also in law enforcement, and he's smart. He does well in school. The biggest tragedy is him losing his uncle Aaron. But even that is a different type of tragedy because yes, it's someone he was close to, but Aaron also had his own mistakes he made prior to Miles' story to begin with. So even his ultimate demise, while sad, is more so of it's still an element of, it's partially the result of his own decisions rather than just someone being a complete victim, like Uncle Ben getting shot by like a random dude. So I think what I've liked is that Miles is organic and natural, but he's not defined by trauma and just awful shit happening, which maybe is like the big push and pull of the movie itself.
I like that take on it, especially because before I always thought of Uncle Aaron as a Uncle Ben stand-in. But you're right, it's totally different. Like Uncle Ben was the basically father figure for Peter Parker. Uncle Aaron is not that. He's a family member that has offered something different to Miles. And it's just a reminder that Miles has his own canon, right? And I think that's really what this movie is about. And the fact that Miles is his own person and he doesn't need to resort to the same tired, backstory of Peter Parker and everybody like him, because Miles is not Peter Parker. And I think that's part of what I really enjoyed about this movie. I already loved Miles like from the start in the first one. Everything you said, Savon, building his family around him, his relationships, and just like him as a personality, it just felt so it felt so believable. It felt so real to me, even though he's an animated comic book character. He was somebody that I could identify with, uh, probably much more so than Peter Parker, who, maybe back in the 50s, Peter Parker was very readily identifiable, but today Miles Morales is like, yeah, that's that kid that I know, or that's me, or whatever. And then so like the fact that he's got his own canon just brought that out even more for me. And I think a big part of it, I think this really works, particularly in this movie, is because he's black, right? Like when he's looking up at Spider-Man 2099, Miguel O'Hara, and saying like, I can break canon. I can go away from this. The whole time I'm just like, yeah, exactly, because you're not this white dude. You're not Peter Parker. Like this is exactly what it's supposed to be about. You're gonna do something different.
You don't have to be defined by this other stuff.
Exactly. You don't. That's those are the right words, right? You don't have to be defined by this paradigm that other people are setting for you in the world. Go do you. And I love the fact that Spider-Punk Hobie was also like the black homie
Goated.
being like, yo, go do like, I know this shit's not going to be right and it's not going to go down right. And you got to do you too. And like, he's like winking at him and saying like, yo, bro, like, that's what you got to do. That's what you got to do.
Anti-establishment Spider-Man was about it.
Yeah, man. Exactly. It's just like, exactly. That is the hero that I want. And so, I'm definitely 100% in for Miles's story.
Mm-hmm. One more thing, Weston. I know what you guys have to say. Other thing, even other stuff they peppered in the movie, right? Like, unlike regular Peter Parker, who we see as being not a big family group, poor, like his Spider-Man's biggest struggle is that he does not have money, right? Like he's always broke, selling pictures of Spider-Man for his bread, all that. They even said it when they're talking to the guidance counselor. They got money. They are a well-off family.
I don't know.
Struggling. Like the dad's a police chief, the mom's a nurse. Even if they got to work, the dad's getting promoted. Like his part of the reason he's also more identifiable is that, as even though people can relate to some of Peter Parker's teen stuff, his home life stuff is not relatable. Even with his really, he's had a lot of adverse childhood experiences. Like, yeah, Peter Parker's had a lot of aces in his life, those bad experiences, but most people can't relate to, some people can, but I think the average viewer can still relate to Miles having a relationship with his parents, but there's the natural tensions that exist as a teenager. Like, that stuff is more readily available than, relatable than, oh, I'm broke and have no one in my life. Like, some people, even if they don't have money, they tend to have somebody around. A lot of people do have parents and family members and mentors, but I don't know. I just think Miles as a whole is just way more relatable to the average person, and it lets them lean into his teen issues more than just maybe problems that feel more like Peter. I can relate to Peter Parker more as an adult than I can as a teenager. I'm like, oh, lack of support structure around me and needing money. Yeah, man, I feel you.
Yeah, there was never ever like a guest wrestling competition where you could go in and like earn money as a kid. Like what was all that circus stuff going on in his backstory? Like, yeah, you can't relate to that.
I would push back. I think Peter Parker is pretty relatable to a lot of people, but
I think Miles is more relatable. That's all.
Maybe not in like that your whole family is wiped out, but in terms of like just trying to find your place in the world, trying to navigate, teenager life, trying to balance the superhero life, like your private life and your public life, right? Like all of those things are pretty universal.
Yeah, I think that's the
themes,
core Spider-Man story, rather than
and I think that's relatable to a lot of people, especially a lot of boys. But I think it's fair to say that like most people haven't had their whole entire family like killed and having to like deal with that trauma. But
to be clear, Peter's relatable. It's just I think they just took everything good about Peter and Miles, and I think they built on it in a way just better in a better way.
Yeah, I love that they make him biracial. I love that his mom speaks Spanish to him. They don't give us subtitles, so if you don't know Spanish, you're just like, I just kind of got to go on the context, like the context and the feel of it. And I love that too, because some things I catch, but my Spanish isn't very good, so a lot of things are just like, I'm just gonna try and go off based on like how they acted about it. So
my audience did not catch that Miles's mom asked him if he shoots webs out of his little butt in Spanish.
Do you know Spanish?
It was great line.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
I know enough that I understood culito. So.
I didn't catch that at all.
I mean, you could tell based on how she acted about it. She was like, wait, can you like... All right. So this movie really... I think not the heart of it, one of the central parts of the movie is certainly about who tells your story. How do you find your own courage to like to do what you want to do and to believe in your convictions and what you're going for. But there's a kind of not even a subplot, but there's another plot of the movie, which is, or a theme of the movie, which is how do parents and kids relate to each other, especially as you're growing older. And what do how do parents understand their kids, and how do kids try and understand their parents in some sort of way? And this wasn't a movie where it was just totally like, oh, we've got abusive parents who don't understand their kids, and the kids like totally, reject their parents at all. It was like a ton of tension on how to be good at both roles, right? How to be a good kid, how to be a good parent, and everybody sitting here being like, we don't fucking know how to do any of this shit, right? Like, what are we supposed to do here? Did that part of the story land with you? I mean, you guys, neither of you are parents, but certainly you have been, that
I'm a
teenager
plant
role.
parent, Wes. Come on,
a planned
don't denigrate
parent?
me.
Planned Parenthood.
Plant parent.
Oh, a planned parent. I cannot. Keep
I also
plants alive.
have parents, so I understand.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a ton of ways
Most
in
people
here. Did any of that land for you? I think I spoiled it earlier. I mean, the moments between Gwen and her dad, we don't know where her mom is in the picture, but we realize that the dad is certainly like, trying his best. He's trying to do the right thing. He's caught between his anger at losing, what's basically become his nephew and Peter, and he blames, Spider Woman. I think she calls herself Spider Woman in the first movie, for this death, because when he comes upon her, he sees that she's over his dead body, and he didn't see the first part where it was he was a lizard and attacked them all, and she's trying to save them all, and his anger and loss about losing this kid that was close to him, who probably considered somewhat of a nephew or at least a mentee, comes out, and he can't control that sense of loss, and maybe if he lost his wife or something like that, that is also compounding, and it's compounding for her too, right? She lost one of her best friend. She's kind of feeling alone and rejecting everything that's going on here, and so their relationship is strained throughout that first part of the movie and throughout the movie in general, and it just made all those moments so hard, especially when she's watching other people's family heal, other people's families come together, and she's not always able to like find that. She's trying to get adopted by the other Spider Woman, but just a lot of hard moments, I think, for her, and those hit harder almost more than Miles's. Savon, what do you think? Parents, kids, were you into it, or were you like, we should just stay with the main storylines here?
No, I mean, it was a good way to engage. I mean, that's one of the reasons this movie was so good, is that it has themes that anybody can relate to. If you're going to this movie with your parent or with your kid, there's themes in this movie that the kids are going to appreciate, and there are legitimate themes that parents are going to appreciate. It's actually funny. It's actually a funny anecdote. Is one of my coworkers was talking about going to see this movie with his sons this weekend, and he was saying, "Oh man, my son wanted to, his kid's like 9 and 10. He's like, man, he wanted to have his friends come too." And I'm like, that's cool, but I thought this was our thing. Like, I thought we were supposed to go see this movie, and it was hilarious because I'm like, well, this is a grown adult, cool dude, but even him was doing. And we talked about this Thursday before I saw the movie. So like the day before, I didn't know what this movie was gonna be about, right? So the day before, I have like a person talking about how, oh man, my sons are growing up. I knew it was gonna happen. I just thought it was gonna happen more, and it was like 13, 14, not 10. Like, I don't mind having the friends come, but I thought this was our thing we do together, like us. And just like, hey man, that's just the natural progression. You gotta find the other things that y'all also relate on and have that be your thing, even if it's a different movie series or activity or whatever. But
gotta cut the cord.
But yeah, it was super, super meta. So I liked it in that, even though I can't personally identify with that, I mean, it does still remind me of like just my student relationships I did have when I was in the classroom, like that sense of mentorship and wanting people to do their best. It's not parenthood, but it is a similar sense of, I'm invested in your success. I judge a lot of my feeling based on how well you do. Like, that's going to be what I judge myself on, right? So that's still relatable, but I think it just makes the movie more appealing for people across the board. Parents are going to go to this movie with their kids, and they're going to also go in this movie thinking, because keep in mind, to your point, I think Brian, one of y'all said this, there aren't any bad parents in this movie. There aren't any parents that are evil or cruel or negligent. A lot of them are flawed, imperfect, trying their best. You know, like the scene when Spider-Man and Miles Morales Spider-Man is talking to the cop who does, his dad, and he doesn't know that he's talking to his son. That scene was for the parents.
Yeah,
They wrote that for
definitely.
the adults at the movie so that because his dad really was just opening up. And then he even made the joke, man, your generation ignore your mental health. Like, dude, they were not pulling punches. It was very on the nose in the best way of, this is an older black man in a very intense career field with a young black son who
I like
really
that we're saying
just,
older. He's probably younger than me and Brian.
No, what you mean?
He's
Yeah, he's
probably
older than
supposed
y'all.
to
Movie,
be.
he's probably in his 30s.
Yeah,
Nah,
he's probably supposed to be younger than
Miles
me.
No,
is a
actually, Miles is
teenager.
a teenager, so 40s.
Miles is a
He's
teenager.
probably in his 40s.
He's
He
definitely
might have had him when he was 22.
Yeah, so
he
he'd
looks
be-
like a man in his 40s. He looks like a man in like his 40s.
All right.
Point is, like,
I love. Wait. Can I say something that I couldn't
Shoot.
believe? Miles said maybe you should get off his ass. I was like, what? Who's saying that to their parents? Like, what? Never would I say that to my
Convenient to be in a costume.
parents.
Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe you should have dressed up in a onesie and a mask.
he was feeling himself way too much in that moment.
yeah, but he's not wrong, but he's not right either. But again, that's why that entire dynamic with them was so entertaining. So all the
It's not
parenting
what you
stuff,
say, it's how you say it.
Yeah,
Didn't you
so
tell me that before?
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's all about delivery. But point is, it was funny. So between Miles' dad and him just opening up about how parenting makes him feel so insecure about his actual decision, man, he's got a successful career, beautiful wife and son, but he's like, yo, am I doing anything? He's got mad imposter syndrome, which is super real. Then you got, Peter Parker, the old grizzled one, who's now is just like, I think he's in his West phase of just, yo, this baby has changed everything about what my priorities mean. Look how precious she is. Yo, man, this shit different. Like, I'm sure you were identifying with him all throughout the movie. I know you wouldn't have took.
And he was
Baby
like,
Kaya
I'm bringing the
slinging
kid
his-
along. We're going to
Yeah.
go do this fun thing.
Yeah, which was still like, they did that bit really funny. And then to your point, the relationship with her and the dad, of like, the dad really does. Like, I understand why he's doing what he's doing. I don't agree with it at all, but his character motivations and his grief makes sense. Like, he lost somebody who was like a son to him and his daughter's best friend, and like didn't have the context. So the adults, this movie did a good job of, even if the adults kind of exist in somewhat antagonistic ways to some of the younger folks, doesn't inherently make them bad, and it shows them as human and flawed, which I think everybody going to the movie can appreciate. The parents don't feel like, oh, we're being vilified by the teenagers. Like, nah, bro, it's just complicated.
I love that dad bod Peter Parker. Not only was he wearing
The robe, the pink robe,
pink robe that probably had like bath towel material or whatever, but he was
Terry
at
Claw.
one point he's also reading a book that says like how to speak to kids so they'll listen, and how to listen so the kids will speak to you, or something like that.
Yeah.
That is the entire movie. There you go.
Yeah. I love it.
So I liked it a lot, Wes. And the more we talk about it, the more I'm like, yeah, this was actually a really well executed part of this movie, just the parenting relationships in general.
I thought so. And it's not like it's not a groundbreaking, right? I mean, there have been tons of movies, tons of stories that deal with or that try to highlight the difficulties of those relationships, about the generational gaps that appear, like when parents and kids get to try and to communicate. But I think they did it really well here, and they showed it in a way that was not one note, right? It was very like gray in terms, or it's complex. Maybe not gray is the right word, but it's very complex in how it all fits together. And it was great because that's kind of how real life is. It's messy. It's all up in all over the place. Everybody's just trying to do their best.
Yeah.
And,
It wasn't
sometimes doesn't come out
one-sided
right.
perspective either.
Yeah,
I think
that's why I
that
push back, Wes.
makes it strong.
No,
What's that?
where I push back is I think what does make it groundbreaking is that it's not one-sided. Most movies parent relationships is one of the most universal human experiences, because we all on some base level have like at least a person who birthed us or parents that raised us on something, most folks, right? Like, that's not a new trope, but a lot of media, to your point, does not do a good job of showing how complicated it actually is. Usually it's one party, a parent, is blatantly in the wrong, and it's about forgiveness or moving past them or not being defined by an awful person. But this one, there is no awful. It's just complicated. I do think that's something that most parent relationships that get portrayed in most media, usually in most media, there needs to be one parent who's the bad guy or a kid who's the bad guy. And it's just not that the parents aren't bad guys, even if they're an opposing force in certain ways. And that is nuance that I think most media don't get.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with your use of most, but it's not uncommon. I mean, Everything Everywhere All at Once does something like this. Even like Crazy Rich Asians does things like this. There's, Wakanda Forever has complicated parent-kid relationships.
But even that one, the dad was in the wrong. Like that movie, the clear thing is that the dad was wrong, and like the plot is because of him effing up and being wrong. Like,
yeah, but not wrong in a way that he's like trying to be malicious. Well, maybe with
he killed his brother and left the
Yeah.
child in another country, and the child grew to
But
be.
he's trying to guide T'Challa in a right way. T'Challa has to deal with like, hey, my dad made some like hard decisions, wrong decisions, maybe like, and that doesn't necessarily mean he was bad for his whole life, right? Like you're not the sum of one bad decision. Your life is not the sum of one bad decision. Yeah, we got something that's like a side note here. So we had a ton of like as we flew through, especially in the what did they call it? The Spider Society, the 2099 Society. There's just a whole bunch of like wacky Spider-Man. There was a Spider-Man I saw with like a bag over his head. It didn't even look like Spider-Man.
Did he have a brown paper bag?
Yeah, like a Saints fan.
Oh my
from,
God.
20 years ago or something.
I actually can tell you exactly who that is, Wes. I'm glad because I don't think I saw that in the movie, but I know what you're talking about. Did he have a blue suit?
Maybe.
So
it was fast.
There's a version,
little, but he had some kind of bag.
There's a Spider-Man story where I think Peter Parker temporarily is joining with the Fantastic Four, but he loses his uniform and has to wear like a brown paper bag on his head to hide his face. And like there's games where
and it stays on.
Like it's like a joke costume, but yes, it's So he has to get a Fantastic Four costume because he doesn't have his costume, but their uniforms don't have a mask. And Spider-Man needs a mask, so he wears the brown paper bag. So if you saw I have to rewatch the movie, but if he had like a blue suit and a brown bag, that is specifically what they're referring to. It's called the Bombastic Bagman suit. It's in the Spider-Man game too.
Bombastic
unlockable.
Bagman suit.
Yeah,
need to earn that.
Deep cut.
All right. But honestly, they were all so small that like I really didn't see a whole lot. Like the one where he's hiding on the back, like I've never seen that Spider-Man before. There was some really like buff Spider-Man, especially in the Time Cop Spider-Man. They were like hulky bulky kind of Spider-Man going on there. So there was just like thousands of different iterations of Spider-Man. I don't know how many of them were like callbacks to Spider-Man that appeared in the movies or games or movies or whatever, or cartoons, comics. Or how much they made up. Maybe they just made some up too for the.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I don't know.
You got to go frame by frame
Spider-Man?
just to like pick them all.
I have to frame by frame it when this comes out on like DVD or whatever. I'm just gonna have to frame by frame. But most of them, just because Spider-Man's been so popular for so many decades, you have like the Tyrannosaurus Rex thing. Believe it or not, is from a comic.
I thought they made that up for the movie.
No,
I liked it.
There's a lot of those that are like this looks like nonsense. So, comics they be doing some nonsense sometimes.
I guess that's true.
Maybe from
the Spider-Ham thing
world?
from the first movie was a thing in the comics.
Yeah.
So
was the noir Spider-Man a real Spider-Man?
I think so.
Is that in comics?
Not comic spin-offs for almost. They do comic spin-offs for almost everything, especially with Spider-Man. So I would be a betting man that majority of the ones you saw in there are from something somewhere.
Well, was there any favorites you had ones you saw that you were like, oh, that's kind of cool?
I'm kind of with Brian on like the Scarlet Spider, the Ben Reilly clone at the end, who was just like, I think he was played by Andy Samberg, the super edgy, dramatic one.
Was that Andy Samberg?
That was Andy Samberg. I had to look up the voice cast because the voice.
Was he the one in the jean jacket?
Yes, the jean jacket. That's like a Spider-Man clone.
Yeah.
Ben Reilly. Yeah, he's a Spider-Man clone.
Okay,
but he has an alternate identity. But his whole thing is like he's supposed to be a parody of the 90s super buff, edgy, dark versions of characters, which is why they made him basically super emo and narrate his all stuff and all be all really serious.
Wait, so is he a satire in the comics, or they're satiring him in the movie?
They're satiring him in the movie.
And it's meant to be, and it's making fun of the character and like the time period, because the 90s in general would just try and be really gritty, and characters were buff for no reason, and the art style was very you know, like if you saw any overly buff,
so much musculature.
Like I think it's almost a parody of Rob Liefeld, who used to be a comic artist who like epitomized the 90s style of just excessive pockets and rippling muscles that don't match the character and poor anatomy understanding.
It's definitely Rob Liefeld. Yeah, which is why there's that moment where he's like admiring his own biceps.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a Rob Liefeld joke. People at home, you should just Google Rob Liefeld. He was a comic book artist, but his style just epitomizes 90s stuff, and he's clowned pretty hard because once you recognize his style, you recognize he just draws big buff people and cannot draw feet.
It can't draw feet, man.
It's really funny.
All right.
I was also into the old school cartoon Spider-Man, like from the 1960s cartoon or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I'll get him. But really, he's not even animated. He's just like a still drawing, like moved across the frame ever so slowly and just like completely helpless in that situation. That was a fun one. I think there was also another live action hit that they did was from the Japanese Spider-Man, I think. Live action
Really?
Spider-Man from like the
I did
80s
not
or
see that
something
at
like
all.
that. I think that was like in one corner of the screen. There's just like so much going on. But who was the Avatar black woman Spider-Woman person?
I don't know that one. Not sure.
She's like sitting in her room with VR. I wonder if they just made her up for this or if she's a pre-existing character.
See, that's what's fun, man. The Spider-Man lore has been so deep and these characters been modified in so many ways over the decades that you legitimately, like, y'all thought the T-Rex thing was made up. It's like, nah, bro, that's a thing. And it's going to be like, it's just, we're going to just have to do like a mini episode, like several months from now, where we just go through the frames of all the actual different Spider people in the movie. But
I'm sure someone will make that for us and we'll be able to just parse it.
So
it'll be good.
I briefly, though, I want to spin the block black on. Was it Bodhi?
Hobie.
Okay, we were talking about other stuff. I gotta spin this block. Hobie was hilarious. I think we all went through the roller coaster ride of who is this clown?
Yeah.
Well, we were worried that Gwen was shacking up with Hobie.
Yeah, I'm just like, hey, who is Homebolio? Hey, what is this? I'm like, oh my god, he talking all this anti-establishment crap, blah blah blah. And then when you realize, oh, he really about that life, and has no qualms about. And he's saying the babies are the first anarchists. I'm just like, with the baby going around with the shenanigans. I don't know if y'all caught this when he was stealing all of the random crap. Do y'all remember that? They had that whole bit.
He picked up the like jump drive off the
yeah.
But remember how just throughout it he was just constantly just klepping stuff and taking whatever he saw when he was in the spider place.
I only saw him take that one thing.
So if you
did multiple times.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, Brian. He did it. That was how he built his own little time portal thing that he gave to Gwen at the finale of the movie. It took me a second to realize, wait, what? He was stealing and klepping all that stuff. But point is, when they were about to arrest, but when they were all about to like detain Miles, and then he's just kicking Nicole, starting crap, and your boy's just like, you're not helping. He's like, good. And it's so tense. I was in my seat in the theater like, let's go.
That was pretty funny. I liked when he was like, how are you cooler without the mask?
That's what I was about to say. That's exactly like, because I was like, Miles, okay, we're on the same page, bro. Because I definitely wasn't expecting like this badass black British dude with the dreadlocks and the tattoos and the piercings. I'm like, Miles, bro, I'm on the same page, pimp. Like, this man dope as hell. And he walks the walk and talks the, he walks the talk, talks the walk. I'm like, oh my God. Why did this punk character who I hated it when I first saw him on screen immediately is like, oh man, it's my favorite character.
Yeah, I love
one
that.
Of my favorites.
They set us up. We were supposed to Miles was supposed to be threatened by this guy, but he turns out to like idolizing this guy. Like, oh my God, who are you?
Yeah, he likes him more than probably like Gwen and even his mentor, who like kind of sold him out a little bit or did him dirtier, honestly. Which, by the way, oof, that shit was heavy. Miles went through it.
Oh yeah. I mean, they all turned their backs on him, or at least, I mean, he felt that way. It might not be 100% in their minds that's what they did. They think they're all trying to do the right thing. But I think that, that whole sequence, the chase sequence and its culmination on the train, and then back down
the
when
moon train.
He's trying to get back.
It was going to the moon.
Man, that was a very intense sequence. It was a fun sequence because we got all the spiders. But when, Spider-Man 2099 just has Miles pinned on the train and he's looking at all the people that he loved, and apparently they've been talking ish behind his back. and have not let him in on it. I felt so hard for Miles in that moment. Like,
wait, I didn't catch
man
that.
against the world.
He assumed that they just weren't telling him
They
that
didn't
his
tell
dad was going to
him
die.
They didn't tell him anything about what they knew about his past or his role in the whole Spider-Verse. He didn't know that they were colluding actually to contain him. And yeah, he felt betrayed, and rightfully so.
What is your understanding of his role in the Spider-Verse? That he's going to be
You
a
got it,
problem?
Brian?
He's the origin of the Spider-Verse,
He's the original anomaly.
Yeah,
That's
he's
what
the
they
original
said.
anomaly
Okay.
because he was the
shouldn't have
one
gotten
that
bit.
was bit by the spider but wasn't supposed to be.
'Cause it was
A
from a
spider
different
from a
universe.
different universe,
Right,
or a different
dimension.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's like 0.0 for all the shattering stuff that's happening in the Spider-Verse. And
Yeah, and from their perspective,
Yeah.
they're like telling him doesn't actually help us here, right? Like they're not going to tell him stuff like that.
well, if you have a
that's
friend
the
or a
betrayal,
loved one,
Yeah.
you will
That's why you
definitely
felt
feel
betrayed.
Yeah.
I mean, because think about it from Miles' perspective. When it's all said and done, it means that they have to make sure that this event happens that results in his dad's death. They don't give any context into how it fits into the larger picture. He's lied to by them from pretty much the entirety of the movie. Why they didn't visit him, these people who he idolized and had this, life-changing adventure with, all that stuff come together. That betrayal hit hard when Miles found out y'all knew too. Like, I was with Miles, like, oh man, this is a gut punch. Like, this, for a movie that didn't kill off any characters, they had a lot of emotional gut punches that hit, which again, that is hard to do, to have you really feel that. And they didn't just do it by killing someone off. They did it by just having characters do maybe morally gray, but ultimately hurtful things to characters we care about. Like, that's ultimately that's good writing, because I feel for Ben and Gwen and them a little bit, but also like, hey man, y'all did my son Miles dirty. And even once this is all over, he doesn't forgive y'all. He's not in the wrong.
So, like, I actually think this is a good segue. I'm going to jump ahead in our little agenda here. I think this actually helps make this movie one of the better, if not best, multiverse piece of content that we get, because they put Miles's emotional story of feeling betrayed at the center of the multiverse, right? It's given intention and a purpose, rather than just let's have fun and games in a sandbox of a multiverse and see like what we can do there, a la like Doctor Strange. This is more about this one character having this issue, right, being at the center of the problem of the multiverse, and then having all the feelings that go with it, feeling betrayed and whatnot. And that's the motivation for all of this. And I think that's partially why this is one of the better multiverse things we got. I think Everything Everywhere All at Once does a similar thing with the multiverse, right? It just feels more purposeful, rather than kind of a gimmick, which is...
They tried to do that with Scarlet Witch a little bit, right? And with Spider-Man, that like he wanted to have his friends not have to suffer because of him, right? And then Scarlet Witch, her pain at having lost her kids is also part of like what's going on there. But yeah, I think
it
just feels like
right?
more
And
shallow.
Doctor Strange, is it?
Yeah.
Well, I think, to your point, Brian, I think what made it work with Miles is that they wove his origin into the multiverse stuff very well from a writing perspective. So it's not just, to your point, it's not just a fun place you explore. It's like, no, all of this is because of Miles and him being an anomaly, and it ties extremely well into his origin story, which tied into the ending. Which, can we talk about the ending? Because good Lord, there's so much to... Man, that was some good stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about the ending, and then I want to talk about any like maybe things that didn't quite work for you, and then we'll wrap it up. So, talk about the ending. I hated it.
Awful. First of all, the entire twist of him, and y'all, this is big spoilers, right? The entire twist of him
spoilers.
getting sent back to the origin of the
Earth
spider's
42.
DNA in him, so not his universe, and it being very similar. It took me a second to catch on. The entire gut punch of Miles finally confessing that he's Spider-Man to his mom, building it all up, really just finally like doing what he feels is right, and then it's all for nothing. And it turns out he's, as you start to realize what the hell is going on, you're like, oh my goodness, that was the twist I was not ready for at all.
Yeah.
They caught me completely slipping with that one. They caught me slipping more when you get to see Uncle Aaron and it turns out his dad died. And then they finally hit you with just one of the best movie moments I've experienced in a hot little minute of just, and while he's playing, while Uncle Aaron puts on the old school music and he's playing, what is it, the Ain't No
I love
Love
that track.
Yeah, he's playing the Ain't No Love, and he's playing the Ain't No Love on like the vinyl, and there's the vibe, and he's silent, and then they build all that up to he's not the prowler. Oh no, my brother. Oh no, it's you, this grizzled, braided hair, and then all the little subtle lines that he's in the wrong place. Right? Oh, you did something different with your hair. I'm like, huh?
Took out your braids.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I get it. I take my braids out sometimes too. It's not a big. But yeah, it was that reveal for the ending was amazing, and that building up to what we're gonna have in like this two-parter is, I think. Again, we said this in the pre-show, right? My thoughts were, oh man, there's a lot of stuff still happening that has not been resolved in this movie. They resolved Gwen's plot line, which I thought was smart because she kind of was the co-lead of the movie, right? But okay, Gwen's story's been kind of wrapped up neatly. It kind of started and ended with her. That's done. Miles still got a lot of shit going on. We got Spot. How's he gonna get home? All this stuff. This movie been in for a minute, and then bam, part 2. But so walking out the movie, I was like, oh man, part 2. Shit.
To be continued. Oh my god!
Man, if you're gonna tell a story, tell the story. Don't leave us hanging.
Nah, but I respect that they recognized the scope of the story they wanted to tell, and we're like, no, this is how we're gonna go about it. Because would you rather this or a story? You know, lots of other movies when they do trilogy, sometimes the third movie undoes character development from the previous movie, or you have to kind of undo the stuff that happened because you got to have a new conflict. I actually don't have a problem with the first movie setting up Miles, and then they still build off it. And it's all one big trilogy, but the finale is actually a two-parter. If this is the scope of the story they wanted to tell, and they feel like, no, it should all begin and end with this Spider-Verse threat and the Spider-Man, Miguel, and all that stuff, and him fighting his alternate self, I think that's a good direction to go, rather than trying to maybe do a totally new story after wrapping this one up and coming up with a new conflict. So,
it's hard to judge, right? Like, my cooler head is saying, let's reserve judgment until we see it. It comes out next March 26th, I believe, is when it's slated.
Which means they have already been making it, which means they probably were making it and just said, hey, man, we're just going to have to split this joint up. So, like, it's not like
maybe they did that from the beginning. Maybe they knew it was going to be a two-parter from the beginning.
I was looking up. Apparently, I think they did. I think a decent little minute ago, they realized, hey, man, it's going to be a two-parter. I don't think this was like a last-minute decision because they probably spent 6 years making the movie realizing, hey, yo, this is...
Yeah, I think it's been delayed a couple times, right?
So... That's my cooler head, is just like, let's reserve judgment. Maybe it'll be worth having 2 movies, and having the cliffhanger in the middle. And we don't have to wait more than a year. We have to wait less than a year, so 10 months or so. So, I could see it working out. But I still hated it. I was like, you just didn't. I mean, you didn't tell a full story in one movie that, it's usually a movie has like, even if it's going to continue, there's kind of a beginning, middle, and end. And this one had a beginning and a middle and no end. So it's frustrating, I think, to walk out of a movie like that. And I hope that it becomes worth it, that we see the next movie and we're like, oh, okay, yeah, I see why they needed 2 movies for this. But it felt, and Jen said this, and I kind of agree that like, they probably could have tightened a few things up and we could have had it all in one movie, but I mean, we'll see. Like, spend a little less time in the 2099 era, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure. We'll see. I don't want to say for sure. I'm hoping that it's going to be worth it, but it didn't feel good to leave the movie with like so much unresolved.
How did you feel at the end of Infinity War?
What did you say?
How did you feel at the end of Infinity War?
Part of it was...
You knew going in.
I knew going in there was going to be another movie in the next year, and they had made that really clear from like a year before that there was going to be 2 parts to it. So I felt less hoodwinked.
What about Back to the Future 2? How did you feel at the end of that?
I don't know if I ever saw it.
But
this is how I felt at the end. This is how I felt at the end of Dune.
How'd you feel about the Empire Strikes Back?
I don't know. I mean, I was old enough where the third one was already out, so I could watch it in the next one.
So more at the end story, of Dune, watch these things when they're on DVD.
Yeah, I didn't know Dune was going to have a second part and finish so unconcluded either, and I felt kind of hoodwinked by that one. Because none of the promotional materials had said like, hey, this is going to be a 2-parter or 3-parter or
Or
whatever.
like the Harry Potter movies, when it's like Harry Potter definitely had those part 1, part 2.
Yeah. But they
Dune
made
also
that
wasn't
clear.
definitive until
Again, it's just about how you market it and like how people know ahead of time or not whether to expect it to end or not. And I expected this one to have an ending, and it didn't. And me and Jen just looked at each other and we're like, really?
Wes was angry in the pants.
That's where we're gonna end it. And there's a good thing to it too, because I'm like, I'm definitely gonna go see this movie in a year. So I mean, it's
that to be
it's good for
continued
them.
screen. Just everyone in my theater was like, "Oh my god, what? I can't believe it!"
Yeah.
I knew in
do you
advance
think?
because I saw a headline that
Okay.
said like part 1. I was like, what? But I do feel a little bit. I can understand where you're coming from, Wes, because I also, during this film, during this movie, I was just like, wow, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And and the battle, the moon train fight, that kind of felt like
That was gonna be
something
the
of an
conclusion, right?
ending.
Yeah.
And then it kept going, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, wait, but
Uh-oh.
all these other loose ends, as Savon, listed, they're still going on. Like, are we gonna get all of that now? Because I knew that there would be a part 2, but the movie is still running, right? So that whole like last 20 minutes, I was just like, oh, maybe we're just gonna keep going with this thing. Man,
So-
like maybe. But the thing is that I felt like I had already spent 3 hours in the theater. I could feel
It felt
that,
long.
but I was ready to sit for like another couple hours. I was just like, I am so with Miles. I am so with Gwen. I'm so with these characters and what's going on and how they're delivering it that I would have sat there through early wee hours of the morning to resolve what was going on. It was just like that good of a ride. But I do think there are definitely slower parts of this movie, particularly in the beginning. I kind of think the parent-child relationship stuff, maybe it gets a little long.
You get 3
and
different versions of it.
could be trimmed in some places. Like, could they have had 1 3.5-hour movie? Could they have had 1 3-hour movie? I don't know.
We don't know until we see
like
the
you
second one,
kind of
right?
like shoot yourself in the foot if you start telling people you have a 3-hour animated Spider-Man movie.
That's true.
So it's tough.
So,
but
I had to check.
I'm here for the ride for sure.
So I had to check the internet. They did confirm. I'm looking at an article from April 20th, 2022, and they said even when they were delaying the movie from October to whatever this release date was, they did say that regardless, Across the Spider-Verse Part 2 was stated for a March 2020, whatever, not this year release. So they did. So actually, I think it's been known for a hot minute that there was going to be a Part 2 to this movie. Yeah, like this article from over a year ago. Meanwhile, the Pick sequel, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Part 2, is dated for March 29, 2024. So they didn't market it that way in terms of like the branding, but a lot of the articles and like if you kept up with the actual production and things about the movie, they did say it's going to be a 2-parter. Or some people can know that going in. Now they didn't market it that way. I'll give you that, Wes, but do with that information what you will. They knew this going in quite some time. They just probably didn't want to market the movie that way, which I don't have a problem with necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they wanted or didn't want people to know that there was really a second part to it that was going to be like that they weren't going to resolve this one. So I don't know. I mean, it's both a critique and like I understand it. I feel like they should have resolved a little bit more, but if they really imagine this as a 2-parter, I don't see why they couldn't have publicized that a little bit more also, especially since they're doing them back to back, right? You're going to get it in less than a year. I mean, they're already, almost done, not almost done with it, but you know what I mean? Like they're already, quite a bit into it. They've already recorded everything I'm sure that they want to record.
I guess the marketing does itself when it's less than a year and you get all that hype built up in the movie itself. That probably did a lot of organic marketing. Because I know me, the moment they say, I'm like, they got another part next year? I'm like, oh, word. Well, guess I'm going to buy my ticket.
Yeah, but...
I've reserved it on my calendar.
I was like, we got them.
Oh, this is AP season. Doesn't matter. I'm still going to see this movie.
We got him. So no, that's
I'm hooked.
That's a fair critique. What I will say though is we've had a variety of Marvel movies and movies in general we've talked about, and that includes Guardians with Adam Warlock, right? That means the Talokan in Wakanda Forever. That means even some of like the side stuff in Thor. All of those movies, in my opinion, suffered from there not being enough gore, god butchering in Thor Love and Thunder, right? All those movies, comic book movies that try and do a lot, because comic movies in general try and do a lot, all suffered from trying to do too much in one movie. I'm not saying that those movies needed to have a part 2. In fact, I don't think they needed a part 2.
Yeah,
but
God, no, Love and Thunder, please.
But
no.
but I'm saying that movie could have used like another 30 minutes of just, gore doing stuff. But my point is, this is what the alternative to that looks like. Or even Ant-Man, right? They tried to do a lot. This is the alternative of, okay, we've seen what movies feel like when they try and do too much and how that can hurt the movie. Or not hurt it, depending on how you feel. This is the alternative where they decided, the scope of what we're trying to do is so big, 2 movies would be the only way to do it justice. I think, obviously, you still got to make a good movie. That doesn't guarantee it's going to be good, but I think I'm more in this camp of, hey, dude, if you rather just, like, if your story's too big to tell in one movie, this is why I've always critiqued movies in general, in that, like, yo, man, sometimes 2 hours ain't enough time to tell the story you want to tell. And that's why I like TV shows, but I'm okay with doing a 2-parter if it tells the story that needs to be told and it lets you actually do all the beats you want to do. Because I would hate if this movie was another 30 minutes longer and you still in your seats longer, and then they half-ass rush through stuff that they want to conclude. So rather than it get the screen time it deserves to have weight, they just kind of were like, oh, crap, we're at the end of the movie. All right, well, let's just wrap up these conflicts super quickly, even if it's not satisfying. Like, I don't know what's going to happen with this stuff in this movie. The stuff that's not wrapped up, I don't know what's going to happen. But knowing that I'm going to get a whole movie for them to address it leads me to believe that it's going to be good, especially considering the track record of the other movies in the series is good. So it's not like people don't know what they're doing. Like, if you're making good movies and decide you want to do a part 2, hey, man, you already put out good stuff. I'm not going to push back on it.
Yeah,
I don't disagree. I just think those are not the only 2 alternatives, right? Like, you could have a tighter movie that ends up being really good. You could also have 2 movies and just tell people this is part 1 of 2 and like be really upfront about that and hype it up as like the first chapter of the next saga, and then wait for the big conclusion next year or something. I don't know, but maybe that eats into their sales, and I don't know, it just felt a little bit to me like I got tricked by the end.
It could also backfire, right? Like, if it just feels like a blatant cash grab, right? Like, we're splitting this up into 2 movies because it deserves that.
Because people did that,
especially for an animated movie. Let's not forget, Americans do not look at animation, with the same kind of respect as other movies. So you tell people like a Spider-Man animated movie is gonna have a 2-parter, and one part is already 2.5 hours or whatever. It could reek of cash grab, and you might have already lost a big chunk of your audience.
If you do, damned if you don't.
Yep.
But I think Wes, you're kind of alluding to this, the opposite of what Savon was saying. Do comic book movies need to be so overstuffed? Like, I kind of, in this movie, I love that it's overstuffed. However,
in general,
there is a case to be made for the really slim, tight, singular character focused comic book
Raimi
movies.
Spider-Man movies, and like the solo, the Raimi Spider-Man, the OG, even some of the older Batman, even the Nolan Batmans tried to do a lot, fitting a lot of villains in sometimes. But no, I agree. I mean, that's like the pros and cons of when you decide to do a connected universe. Like, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
If you do it correctly, you get to have these awesome characters have dope interactions, which is why I personally enjoy. Which is why people like the Avengers and whatnot. But then the flip side is that if it's too overstuffed and the character has too many villains, too many rogues, too many things.
Yeah, too many villains. Why do we need multiple villains?
Yeah, even if it's not a connected universe, like Spider-Man 3, the Sam Raimi had that problem. They tried to do Sandman, Goblin, Venom all in one movie, and it suffered, right? Because it's like, and that wasn't a big connected universe. So it's, comic books have a very tricky game to balance, and I think it's more of a creative decision of, do you lean into the comic element of these huge cast of characters, or do you do a singular, more focused story and take the good with the bad of, okay, you don't get the cool cast of badasses doing their thing, but you get something like what Logan was rather than maybe what X-Men 3 was.
Yeah, we need like the equivalent of a comic book one shot, right? Just like a tight story, wraps up in between its own covers. Like I read somewhere somebody was suggesting like they just got to make the Batman finding Killer Croc in the sewers of Gotham City. That's the whole movie, and it's dark. It's a thriller. You don't know where Croc lurks in every shadow, and that's the movie.
That'd be terrifying.
That would be amazing.
All right, let's wrap it up there, friends. Across the Spider-Verse, I would give it a incomplete. I'm not even gonna grade it on a scale of 1 to 5.
What's wrong
Oh
with
my
you?
God.
Incomplete.
And
Wes probably sent an angry letter to Sony saying, "I did not appreciate that this was not marketed as a multiple parter when you
How
knew
dare
that."
you?
And
How
I
dare
just
you?
said
felt
it on-
deceived.
I just said it on our podcast. That's all I did. That's the
My
20.
pearls.
It's the 2023 way to do it. You don't write a letter. You start a podcast.
We're gonna go viral and get people. We're gonna start a petition. You should start a petition, Wes.
Change.org. These trailers
Taco
need to change.
Tuesday. Change.org. Brian, how many would you rate it out of 5?
I'm giving this a 9 out of 10.
Nice.
Spiders, not
out of
5. I don't need a reserved judgment for the next movie. Even if another movie for whatever reason, like the film got blown up or something, and we just didn't have it, this would still be an amazing watch. I
very
mean,
good.
like the Spider-Verse movies.
Bad
oh
taste
my
in
God.
my mouth at the end.
So much better than other comic book movies.
Yeah, that's fair. It's very good. Savon.
I'm gonna give it 7.5 spider legs out of 8.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you
I like that. I like that tie in there.
Yeah, you like that? Yeah,
You had
so,
me.
man.
I was like,
Now I'm
7.5.
jealous.
Come on, man.
7.5 spider legs out of 8. No, this was just a great movie. It's visual. I told you I like to go to be entertained. I was entertained. The music was great. The art was great. Characters were great. If you're a comic book deep cut nerd, you can appreciate so many levels of this movie and the cool MCU references they made. Like we got Doctor Strange references. We got to see Donald Glover Prowler. In the dorm, I don't know if y'all caught this. The guy in the room who was the friend
Genki.
playing the video games. Yeah, he's the guy who was the friend in the Spider-Man game, right? Lots of just
he is
in the game. Yeah,
and he's playing the Spider-Man game.
Yeah, and he's playing Spider-Man 2. I had to look it up. He's playing Spider-Man 2, the old PlayStation game. Like, there's crap like that people like us will love. But I think this movie is probably in that category of, I think I could take my mom to see this, and she could reasonably be able to keep up more or less with what's going on. Like, I think the Universe Spider-Blood part can get a little confusing because I had to sit in my car after and make sure I understood it right. But this movie feels very accessible, which is very hard to do for how bold of a concept it is of just a multiverse of Spider-Man. Like, that's really hard to, I think, make accessible. This movie I felt was relatively easy to follow. You can understand the main beats and see what's going on, and that's really hard to do for how ambitious the scope of this collective movie is. You don't have to like Spider-Man or any comic book stuff to watch this movie, and at least, like, it's a work of art, straight up, man. Like, the art style alone, there were multiple scenes where you could cut the sound off and not hear what people are saying and read the vibe solely off of just how the art and color corresponds to characters' moods and what's going on and the animated cinematography. And so this movie, top to bottom, just had a lot of care, a lot of work put into it. And if you watch it, you're going to walk away feeling something.
It's funny how the animated characters are so much more emotive and so much more compelling as emotional characters than a lot of the live actors in other movies. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's the
it's
strength
almost
of animation.
Yeah,
right?
that's the whole point. That's why animation
It's
is
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, I hate when we talk about this, Wes. Like, that's the strength of animation. Lean into the strength of what your medium can do. And they took advantage of everything. They probably created new ways to be cool with animation. That movie was blowing me away. I'm really going to love watching this movie a second time.
Oh, absolutely.
Amazing. Are you going to go see it in theaters again?
Oh, hell yeah.
Give them your hard-earned money?
I think so.
Yeah.
You know,
700 million. Come on, let's go.
$10 matinee. I could throw them 20.
I got Movie Pass. Wes,
All
are
right,
you
that'll
sure
wrap
you're
us
going to
up.
leave it with an incomplete for the summer? Is that
Yeah.
you're
really
going to
not
do
gonna
it
say
dirty
no-
like
you really
that?
not gonna- you really gonna do that, Wes? Come on, man, be better than that.
All right. I mean, just because it left a bad taste in my mouth, it's a 3.8 right now. But
Out
if
of
the second
what?
part out of 5, if the second half brings it home, it bumps up to a 4.5.
Are you
right?
high?
It was so good, and then they just left us hanging, and it was a disappointment.
Endgame could have been awful, and it wouldn't have changed how good Infinity War was in terms of like whatever rating I gave that movie walking out the theater.
Accurate.
It can make you appreciate it more, but it's not gonna. Game of Thrones ended awfully. That does not take away the good episodes that you had leading up to all that.
No, yes, it does.
You want some good, boy? You want some good gas?
You have negative bias here.
Yeah,
like ending bias or whatever it's called. Last
Man,
remembered
what is that?
bias.
Recency bias.
Recency bias. There we go. We got there.
Yeah.
We were doing so well, and then Wes just decided to just stab us in the gut at the end.
I agree with everything you said.
I feel betrayed.
I enjoyed it. I was so good, and I just wanted something different than that ending. But if it comes together in the next one, for sure, like it's still a masterpiece.
Cliffhangers are one of the oldest forms of quality storytelling historically.
This is different than a cliffhanger, though. I don't know. Whatever.
Dude,
it's
in
fine.
the Game of Thrones books, Jon Snow got stabbed, and there's just no resolution, and it's been like 15 years since that, or it's been like 10 plus years. Like if you're a book reader, you just see Jon Snow get stabbed, and then just nothing happens for 10 years.
I mean,
George
he's dead in your
R.
mind,
Martin,
I guess.
He's just using all of that time and space for dramatic tension.
All right, hit us up on Instagram at confidently_pod. Let us know what you thought. Did the finale ruin it for you? Did it just like dampen your enthusiasm, or did it whet your appetite for more? WHET. How are we gonna be with this? Man, what a great movie, and what a weird way to end.
You're not allowed to say that.
I didn't know it was coming. I was taken for such a surprise that I just had the WTF face on for maybe a good 3 minutes. I was like, is there going to be more? Are there going to be post-credit scenes here that answer something? No.
See, I was excited. I was like, oh, shit, it's really on. That means this new movie about to hit the ground running.
You don't value your $10 is what I'm hearing.
How dare you?
All right, that'll be it. Have a good one. We'll see you next time around. We don't know what we're talking about next. There's all kinds of things coming out this summer. Peace out. Bye.